Okay, shalom, y'all. This is Gene Keener with SYMF Yeshua Messianic Fellowship. This is our Wednesday evening Galatians study. We are currently in chapter 4, and we'll be picking up where we left off from. And it's going to start at about 6 o'clock-ish Jewish time. You know how that goes. Going to vamp here for a few minutes, so give anyone who wants to check in time to check in. So let me explain a few things, I guess. This is SYMF Yeshua Messianic Fellowship. We're in California, and the congregation name is spelled SYMCHATYESHUA. We have a website, simchatyeshua.org, and also a Facebook page, Simchat Yeshua. You can look in on us there. We usually have downloads of the study that I'm presenting, if I get it up in time. if not immediately, sometime soon it'll be up. So if what you're looking at on the screen when I'm showing the actual study, you're thinking to yourself, "Hey, that would look nice. I'd like to have that." Yes, you can get it. Just find it on the website. I don't really check the Facebook page, so I don't remember or notice if it's showing up. The documents are showing up, but it should be on the website. Okay. Let's see. You can reach us through the website. If you like what you're hearing and like what you're seeing in the way of the study, be sure to do all the YouTube things, which is to like, subscribe, share, and ding the bell so you can be notified when we go live. We do get together Wednesdays at 6 o'clock California time, and that's we're off and running. Okay. Getting a notice that YouTube's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming, which is odd because I have the camera off, so just to keep it simplified, because the way this thing works sometimes is there's a delay on from when I talk to when you hear. I think some of that's wired in naturally, but on our setup, the way we have it, it's anything from 30 seconds to 2 minutes or more. And so to simplify that stream, I stopped using the video. Otherwise, you'd be seeing my lovely face talking at you, which is probably a good reason why people don't watch it anymore. Anyways, be sure to, Oh, one other thing. We do have a chat window available for you on the stream, and please feel free to type in, say hello, let me know who's on. And if you have any questions, comments, or rebukes along the line, be sure to put that in. I am trying to, even after all this time, trying to train myself to check the chats more frequently, because there is a time delay from when I speak and you hear. I want to make sure that I don't go too far ahead on the study where it's going to be harder to back up and cover what it is that you're either questioning, commenting, or rebuking over. It doesn't matter what you say, Well, actually, it does matter what you say, but it doesn't matter if you're just commenting, or if you want to add something, or put something in to add to what's being said. Even if you want to disagree, that's okay. This is more yeshiva than seminary. You are permitted to and voice a different opinion. You are permitted to discuss and even disagree. That's okay. That's all part of the learning process. And just like iron sharpens iron, and when you do that, of course, sparks fly. So not that we live to argue and be angry with one another. In fact, you should never be angry with each other. But it is a good thing to do to make your point of view if you want to disagree, that's okay. You can disagree. It's not a problem. Um, so, anyways, feel free to do that. And I think it's about 3 after 6. So why don't I go? Why don't why don't I go ahead? All right. 3 minutes into this, and already I'm tongue tied. Let me move over to. Well, that's right. I am on the right page for that. Never mind. Let's see. Just have to move to a different window. There we are. Okay, we're going to start in chapter 4 of Galatians. We're going to start in verse 21. However, I want to take a running start and sort of work our way into this. If you have any questions about what we're reading in the run up, you can check last week's study. It should be posted either on that should be posted. Well, yeah, it's here on the channel. So haven't been doing this long enough to where I can remember easily. All right, verse 17. Okay, they zealously covet you, but not for but for no good. Yes, they want to exclude you, that you may be zealous for them. But it is good to be zealous in a good thing always, and not only when I am present with you. My little children, for whom I labor in birth again, until Christ is formed in you. I would like to be present with you now, and to change my tone, for I have doubts about you. So Shaul, that's Hebrew. Paul in English. I should say that's his English name versus his Hebrew name, Shaul. They're actually different words, and they're not meaning the same in both languages, but that's okay. I was reading out of New King James. We use several different versions, and so that's all right. If you have any questions about what I just read, you can check out last week's study, and that'll cover in more detail. Now let's get into our text for the day, verse 21 and following. If my reading is a little bit wonky, it's okay. I had some cataract surgery a week ago, and I'm still getting my vision back from that, so it's a little bit funky. I'm having to use reading glasses where before I didn't necessarily have to. It's one of the results of the surgery. But I still have one eye that's in pretty sad shape, and so between the two of them, my reading isn't always perfect. So if I do a lot of stumbling, just be patient with me. It's supposed to be another week or so I get the other eye done, and hopefully after that things will improve considerably. So, make a short story long. Verse 21. Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a bondwoman, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and he of the free woman through promise, which things are symbolic, for these are the 2 covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gives birth to bondage, which is Hagar. And this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. Okay, for it is written, rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear, break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. For the desolate has many more children than the one who has a husband. She who has a husband. Sorry. Okay, let's take a look at our. Okay, shalom, Barbara. Okay, you mentioned there's buffering going on. My apologies for that. I'm not sure how I can fix that on the run, but just hang in there and I will do what I can. Okay, I'm in the wrong spot again. Okay, there's the right spot. And that's the right spot. Okay, there we are. Okay, Galatians 4e. Okay, commentary. The use of two covenants shows this analogy to be a contrast between ritual conversion and faith in Messiah as a means to enter into the promises. Do you want to be a child of bondage, having attained the status of son like Ishmael did, or do you want to be a child of freedom, having attained true sonship by the miraculous work of God like Isaac? Okay, and that's really the point of the argument here. By way of explanation, there's actually a couple points I need to explain in Galatians so that we're on the same page and understanding really how to look at this in a proper fashion. The letter to the Galatians was written basically in to attack the notion that some people who claim to have come up from Jerusalem and come up with authority from the Jerusalem congregation said you have to be Pharisees in order to be properly of the kingdom. In other words, it's nice being Gentile, but you can't really be fully incorporated into the family of Israel unless you make this Pharisaic conversion. Otherwise, you're just not good enough. And this, by the way, is exactly the same argument used in modern day Orthodox. And Paul's answer to that is still the same. You already have everything you need to be family. Okay? And the proof is in the fact that you have the Spirit of God in you and that miracles are happening around you by the hand of God. Therefore, there's nothing that man-made religion can add to the status you already have. So don't make promises that you can't keep, or don't make promises to follow an ism which tears you away from truly walking in the commandments of God without the congestion of man-made rules and distractions, such as in Pharisaism or modern Orthodox. So that's the bottom line. That's the first one. We'll get to other main contentions and issues that Galatians need to be understood. In fact, we're going to run into the first one right away in verse 21. Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? Or in the Englishman's Greek New Testament, tell me, you who under the law wish to be the law, do you not hear? Okay. I like Englishman's Greek New Testament, partially because my Greek understanding of Greek is terrible, and this helps me to see it in what appears to be as word for word as possible. I like to look at the original syntax as well as the verbiage to help me understand what is really meant to be meant. So the first question is which law is Shaul speaking of here? Torah or tradition or both? The context will determine to which law his discussion is being referred. Okay, and this is another major contention with the book of Galatians. Shaul, being a fabulous theologian, nonetheless was a terrible letter writer in that he hinted at things that were understood and discussed with the congregations when he was there, but didn't quite realize, it appears, that there's going to be people coming in later who don't know the context of the original discussion and don't know the details of the original discussion and need a full explanation of what he's talking. So you have here, if you desire to be under the law, don't you hear the law? Well, there's two versions of law going on here, right? Well, what is he talking about? And throughout Galatians and in other places, Paul does not necessarily explain which version of law he is doing. And to make matters even more fun is that at least in the Greek text, he uses the same root word nomos in each of the versions. There are at least four ways that Paul uses the word law. Two of them are in Galatians, and these two are the law referring to God's commandments that we would refer to as Torah or Tanakh. Generally speaking, although it's a misnomer, we all understand it under the phrase Old Testament. That's a misnomer, but it makes the communication go easier. And the other is specifically referring to the Pharisees' rules of how one should live in accordance to God's commandments and in their way of how to be holier than everyone else. And so Paul does not differentiate easily when you're reading Galatians. So if you're reading this and not knowing the difference, tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? Well, wait, which law are you talking about then? And so we need to decipher which version of law are we speaking, okay? So, under the law is an idiom to indicate conversion to Pharisaic Judaism, accepting both the written Torah and the oral Torah, okay? Now, the written Torah is, of course, what we have in our Bible. The oral Torah is what Pharisaism taught, and even modern Orthodox use the same word, which includes all the instructions and interpretations and directions of the teachers that go all the way back from before the Mishnah to nowadays. And everybody's piled on their rules and their understandings and their versions of what they're reading. And that's all considered oral Torah. Okay. Problem with that, of course, is God says we should be following His word. Modern Judaism and even Pharisaism of Yeshua's day was saying that the teachers must be understood as primary. And we'll get to that. There's actually documentation on that, and you get to see it this week. Okay? Another commentary on verse 21. In subjugation to the systems that result from perverting the Torah into legalism. This is Dr. Stern's somewhat thick translation, but he's trying to make a point. Simply because there's confusion over which law are you talking about. He goes the extra yard of using legalism instead of law in some of his interpretation work. And so I really respect his work, and I really like his work. But sometimes the changing the terminology to try to shape an understanding gets a bit thick, and so you have to work through it sometimes. Okay, another commentary. Galatians 4:21-22. Introduction to the illustration of Sarah versus Hagar. Desire to be under the law is speaking idiomatically. Likewise, 5:18, theoretically, with the Spirit, will the Spirit ever lead us to disobey God? How could any theology conceive of such perversity? Okay, this is a great arguing point, by the way. So when someone tells you that Paul writes in Galatians that we can check the law, the proper response should be, which law is he talking about? And there's some counter arguments you can apply. And frankly, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing here is because I want you to win the arguments. I want you to be able to stand on your own and counter bad education with proper understanding. And so this is part of what you need to lay in the way of groundwork is, can Yeshua truly be Messiah if he tells us to disobey the commandments of God? No, he can't. Can Paul truly be an apostle of Messiah if he were to tell people to disregard the commandments of God? No, he cannot. So obviously, any interpretation in Galatians that says then that Paul is saying we need to check the commandments of God, we need to reduce them or eliminate them, is wrong, just plain wrong. Okay, and we see that, you can, my favorite mantras in Matthew 5:17. Think not I came to destroy the law and the prophets. Didn't come to destroy but to fulfill. Aha, says somebody, but fulfill doesn't mean, it means to get rid of, to end, to finish. So, well, okay, time out. Look at the front part of that statement. Where does any idea of lessening or removing the commandments of God can ever be derived of think not I came to destroy the law and the prophets. I did not come to destroy. Okay, think about that. Okay, it's a simple logic statement. You can't make B contradict A in the same statement. All right. When the statement starts off with think not. Okay. So another commentary. Paul understood that the idea behind the phrase works of the law was something specifically opposed to the written commandment of the law of Moses. When Paul retorted with his statement, do you not hear the Torah? It appears to me as a clear reflection of Deuteronomy 12:32 and 27:26. Okay, and I quoted them down below just for reference sake. Okay, and you notice in the in the commentary, the phrase "Do you not hear the Torah?" He already translated as "Do you not do you not hear the law?" In the Greek text, he applied the meaning to Torah, and that's perfectly okay in the context. Okay, now for context, for that context, is Deuteronomy 12:32. Whatever I command you, be careful to observe it. You shall not add to it nor take away from it. And this is the biggest problem of Pharisaism and modern orthodoxy, is they do dare to take away from the commandment of God, and they do require that you accept what they've added to it as being more genuine and more important than what is written, what is directly from the mouth of God. And so we'll get to that. Okay. And then Deuteronomy 27:26. Cursed is the one who does not confirm all the words of this law by observing them. Okay. Very serious curse. And this is the section in Deuteronomy where God tells Moses to put half of Israel on Mount Gerizim and the other half on Mount Ebal. And there's to bless one and to curse the other. And the last of the curses is this line: cursed is the one who does not confirm all the words of this law by observing them. So you can intellectually disagree, you can question, you can argue against the commands of God, but cursed is the one who does not observe them. Think about that. Okay. Verse 22. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a bondwoman and the other by a free woman. And let me check the... Okay. All right, we're good. Okay. Verse 23. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a bondwoman, the other by a free woman. English from Greek New Testament. For it has been written that Abraham two sons had, one of the maidservant and one of the free. Okay. Commentary. See Genesis 16 and 27, 1 to 21, for what the Torah says about Avraham and his two sons. One, Ishmael, was born by the slave woman Hagar. Avraham and Sarah's fear that God would not give them a child indeed made them induced them, I should say, to make use of their maidservant Hagar's childbearing capacity. Their way of forcing God's hand or producing their own feeble pseudo-fulfillment of God's promise was all too much according to the limited capabilities of human beings, literally according to flesh. See also Romans 7:5 for context there. On the other hand, the one, Isaac, was born by the free woman, Sarah, through the miracle working power of God, fulfilling his promise, literally through the promise which he made to her at Genesis 18:9 to 15. So we see here where the illustration begins with um, Ishmael being the product of man-made effort, and Isaac being the product of God's efforts, with man embracing God's efforts. Okay. Okay. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, who used to instruct me. Um, I would bring thee into my mother's house. This is Sinai. Rabbi Berechiah said, "Why is Sinai called my mother's home? Because there Isaac became like a newborn child." Okay, this is a citation out of Canticles Rabbah 8:21. This is rabbinic Agadah. This is rabbinic story and illustration. Um, Sometimes something nice comes out of it, so it's worth looking at. Okay, verse 23. But he who was of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and he of the free woman through promise. Okay, English was Greek. But he of the maidservant according to flesh has been born, and he of the free through the promise. Okay, so new. The question would be, which law is Shaul talking about? Law of flesh versus law of promise. Okay, law of flesh in this case is being used in the sense of, what can we do to make God like us? What can we do to force God to perform His promise? What can we do to cause God to make us part of His family? The answer obviously is nothing. Okay, rather it is promise that we cling to, and this is for Gentiles this is the key. It's not by your effort that you attain sonship. It's by clinging to the promise, by identifying the promise, and declaring that you desire that promise to count for you. This is what Isaiah 53:10 says, and it's if you flip in your Bible and look over at Isaiah 53:10, you're going to think I'm nuts, but um, I spent some hours and great frustration and toil trying to figure out what Isaiah 53:10 meant, and the best that I can come up with, because there's tons of allusions and indirect pointers as to where the language is going, and tons of pronouns that aren't identified to whom that pronoun would point. Um, my best guess at interpreting Isaiah 53:10 comes out something like this: if you look on the sacrifice of Messiah and you ask God to make that sacrifice count for you, He will make it count for you. That is my best interpretive explanation of Isaiah 53:10. And so this is the promise. Okay, you can try to work your way into God's good graces, with all the failing that's guaranteed to happen with that, or you can embrace the method that God has devised for us, and then by in that act of faith of asking God to make that sacrifice count for us. That promise in Isaiah 53 is that He will make it count for us. Okay, God will make it count for us, and so that's the good news in a nutshell. The Besserah in a nutshell, that God has provided for us, that all we have to do is ask that it count for us, and He will make it so. Okay. Let me check again, see if I'm okay. Okay, verse 24. Which things are symbolic? Hopefully, so we're not going to get too confused with trying to read this too literally. For these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gives birth to bondage, which is Hagar. Okay, so now we start with the drash, the explanation, the teaching that Paul set up here with with this picture. Okay, which things are allegorized? These things are the two covenants, one from Mount Sinai to bondage, bringing forth, which is Agar. Uh, One thing I've discovered is that a word which starts with H in Greek apparently doesn't get pronounced. The H doesn't get pronounced. So instead of Hagar, it's Agar. Okay, which law? The law of personal effort to achieve God's promise. That's the thing, and this is the danger of Pharisaism. This is the danger of orthodoxy. Okay, trying to achieve God's pleasure, trying to achieve God's notice, trying to achieve God's acceptance to us by our efforts. Okay, why? The problem is, well, how many of us are perfect? Okay, even those of us who have been at this for a while and have developed a fair bit of talent at walking in God's commandments, um, nonetheless, we still fail. So how can we achieve the perfection of what is required of us to be whole, to be complete? Okay, um, uh, how can we achieve that in a way that God will say, "Oh, you are so good, you deserve to be in my heaven." Um, it doesn't work. We always have to rely on God's grace, God's forgiveness, God's mercy. Um, we just went through Yom Kippur for that reason, so that we can stand before God and beg for the declaration of His mercy upon us, that we are forgiven. And we know in Messiah Yeshua we're forgiven, but it doesn't prevent us from the necessary step of pursuing God for that, because we need to assess the quality of our walk. And if we find ourselves perfect, then you're perfect. But if you find that you are lacking, then it's time to stand before God and ask for forgiveness and to change your ways. Okay, more commentary. Galatians 4:22 to 31 provides a homily for Paul's point about the man-made way and God's way. He uses contrasting mountains, which further reveals the point of this parable. Mountain can be an idiom for tradition or the ability to effectively argue from tradition. Okay, are there two covenants for salvation? One before the cross and a new one after the cross. Classical Christian theology pits two covenants against each other, the old Jewish way and the new Christian way. By reading the promise of the new covenant in Jeremiah 31 and Ezekiel 36 to 38, this view is demonstrably bankrupt. Okay, and this is important to understand. There is no two ways. There's only one way. Obedience is not the cause of our salvation, but it is a sign of the quality of our relationship with God. It doesn't make us saved, but it does help prove that we are saved. You follow me on that, okay? And so basically now we have an allegory, a homily, that's a drash in Hebrew, and an interpretation, an exposition, um, identifying these two mountains as the man-made mountain and the God-made mountain, with using Ishmael and Isaac as opposites. Okay, one made by man's doing and one created by God's doing. And so the bottom line then, the argument to eventually close up with on this homily is which one is right, which one is better, which one should we follow? Okay, the man-made one or the God-made one? Okay, and so embracing what Yeshua has already done for us is the God-made way. Trying to appease people who will never like you by becoming Orthodox or a Pharisee in the context of the letter. Um, what benefit are you going to gain from that? Paul's biggest argument against don't do this is that once you obligate yourself to do things the Pharisee way or the Orthodox way, by your word, you require yourself to perform everything that they tell you you should do. Everything, every little thing. Okay, so obviously, don't do it. Okay, another commentary from Dr. Stern. To make a midrash on the Greek allegoromone, sorry, being allegorized, yeah. Hebrew midrash means to study, to interpretation. It derives from lidrosh, which means to search. So the Hebrew root word is the verb to search, lidrosh. So midrash then is the nounized version of the verb. Okay, most of Jewish midrashic literature brings out ethical and devotional aspects of the Bible, sometimes drawing out and applying what is manifestly there, and sometimes imposing meanings on the text, although the norm in Judaism is to make a midrash that is not to make a midrash that violates the pashat, the plain simple sense of the text. Okay, here Shaul goes beyond the pashat of the Genesis texts, though without violating them. His application of them is bold and shocking. For although the Judaizers can claim physical descent from Sarah, Shaul calls them spiritual descendants of Hagar. Revelation 11:8 has an equally surprising reversal of traditional Jewish identifications. But such shocks are not limited to the New Testament. See Ezekiel 23:34 and Hosea chapters 1 and 2 for comparable examples in the Tanakh. In fact, Yeshua, Jesus in English, Yeshua is Hebrew. Yeshua often used parables in teaching lessons about what is the kingdom of God like. And he often used parables, and parables have they have characters, they have plot, they have a story, and there's always a shock element in the parable, something that you didn't expect, didn't see coming, and then there's always an explanation at the end of what this all means. And you have tons of parables that Yeshua did, and this is sort of the same idea. This midrash is that Shaul is using, employs that same kind of idea. You have pictures, and here you have the shock element of Shaul calling the Pharisees from Hagar, the children of the works of man's hands, being the children of man's works rather than the promise of God. And so that's a shock element. If you're a Pharisee, you're going to be that's fighting words, But and so this is the shock element in this story. Okay, verse 25. Let me check on this again. Okay. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children. Okay. For Agar, Sina, Mount is in Arabia, and corresponds to the now Jerusalem. She is in bondage and with her children. Okay. There's an entertaining syntax with the Englishman's Greek New Testament. Okay, Mount Sinai in Arabia. Probably not intended to settle a dispute about exactly where Mount Sinai is located, but possibly to emphasize that this mountain is not in the land and foreign to Israeli soil. Okay, and I don't want to get sidelined with archaeology and discovery and contentions as to which mountain is supposed to be the correct Mount Sinai, excuse me. Simply because that's an entirely different subject that'll take us an hour to get through. So to keep this short and to the point, Paul is simply making a point that this Mount Sinai is in Arabia. It's away, and so and the reason this makes sense is because Ishmael, the descendants of Ishmael eventually went south into the Arabian Peninsula and developed into what we call the modern day Arabs. So, um, at least that's what I'm told. Okay, um, and the picture then is what Shaul is trying to say is that the Pharisees and by implication modern Orthodox are these ones who have left um, the estate of God, as it were, and set up their own kingdom with their own rules and their own laws. And that would have been fighting words then, and it's probably fighting words now. But that's pretty much what he's trying to say here. Okay. A little further commentary. The two women are two covenants. Shaul does not spell everything out, but counts on his readers to get his point anyways. Back to my earlier commentary about Paul not explaining everything in detail in his writings. Um, so the one covenant referred to is from Mount Sinai, the Torah of Moshe, from Mount Sinai, the Torah of Moshe. Okay. It bears children for slavery. I'm not sure I agree with that comment, but let's hear out what he says. But not because it has because it is bad. Okay, I knew there was a reason I put it in here. Nowhere does the account in Genesis denigrate Hagar. Hence, there is no reason for slavery to be enslaved on the weak and miserable elemental spirits from verse 9 of legalism, because people pervert the Torah into legalistic systems, to a legalistic system. Okay, who does this? The present Yerushalayim, that is the non-messianic Jewish community of the first century, both its establishment and the people loyal to that establishment. The Judaizers, the would-be Messianic Jews who insist that Gentiles become legalists, do the same thing. She, Hagar, the present Jerusalem, serves as a slave among with her children, the legalists. All right, thank you. That was a good explanation. I was a little concerned at the beginning because sometimes I put it in and then come back and look at it later and say, no, why did I say that? All right. Another aspect is the Pharisees and modern Orthodox as well contend the oral Torah, the laws and rules of the Pharisees, were also given at Mount Sinai, thus hoping the oral Torah can have the same weight and value as the Bible. Shaul, Paul, uses the Pharisees' history of oral Torah against them in his point by equating Hagar with their version of Sinai. A similar contrast is presented by referring to the Jerusalem of now being under the fleshly influence of Pharisaism and the free Jerusalem as the mother, instructor of us all. Okay. Continuing on in the commentary. Like Hagar, who had become Abraham and Sarah's surrogate for fulfillment of a divine promise, an act of their own human will as they believed was best at the time, so also the present Jerusalem of Paul's day was in slavery with her children. How is this so? Consider this from Jewish historian Josephus on the scribes and Pharisees and their influence in all public affairs of the Jews in Jerusalem. They, the Pharisees, are able greatly to persuade the congregation of the people, and whatever they do about divine worship, prayers, and sacrifices, they perform them according to their direction. Inasmuch as that the cities gave great attestation to them on account of their entire virtuous conduct, both in the actions of their lives and in their discourses also. Okay, Josephus writes this. So he details a fair bit of contention between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which helps explain certain things when we get into uh, Yeshua's arrest, trial, crucifixion, and resurrection, and stuff like that. And also why Yeshua could have had a Last Supper on the eve of Passover and yet have the Passover sacrifices being done on the afternoon afterwards. We'll get into that some other time, but that's the short explanation. Okay. And so once more from the Talmud and Midrash, the Pesikta Rabbah says, "My son, be more careful in the words of the scribes than in the words of the Torah. Whoever transgresses any of the enactments of the scribes incurs the penalty of death." Tractate Eruvim, page 21b. There is greater culpability in respect to the teachings of the scribes than in respect to the Torah. This is all rabbinic. Some of this would have been known during the time of the Pharisees. Some of this was added not too long after, and some of it a little further. But this is modern Orthodox doctrine, by the way. The scribes respect the Torah. According to the words of the scribes, he is culpable. Okay, Talmud Sanhedrin 88b. A person must not say, "I will not keep the commandment of the elders," the rabbis, that is, because they are not from the Torah. The Almighty says to such a person, "No, my son, rather all that they decree upon you, observe, as it is written, according to the instruction which they teach you," quoting Deuteronomy 17:1, where elders is interpreted to mean rabbis. Okay. So this is these are just this is not the entirety of anything that's ever mentioned on this subject, but you get the idea here is that rabbinic literature indicates that the teachings of the teachers has greater weight than the commandments of God. One of the reasons they used to explain that, of course, is in every generation there must be a new interpretation of the Torah, which has some validity in its argument, in that you have modern things happening that aren't specifically explained in Torah, and you have to interpret, you have to figure out which is permissible, which is not permissible, what we should do, what we should not do in every generation. Back in the time of Moses, there was no electricity, so there's no discussion as to whether or not using electricity on Sabbath is permissible. Okay. For those of you who are curious, the short answer is the Orthodox say no, the conservatives say yes. That's the short answer. Okay. It has to do with making fire. Okay. So Jerusalem is with her children. A remez, a hint perhaps to Matthew 11:19, and I quoted it here. "The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they said, 'Look, a glutton and winebibber, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is justified by her children.'" And a lot of people get confused by that statement because it's a little outside of our normal terminology. If you reword this for the meaning and the intent of what is said, it makes perfect sense. But wisdom is shown by its results. Okay. So what Yeshua is saying is they're complaining about Yeshua hanging out with the sinners. Polite way of talking about the prostitutes and the tax collectors, which were considered traitors within Israel. Okay, why was he hanging out with them? Because they're the ones that need to hear the good news. So wisdom is shown in when these people turn from their wicked ways, and we have a person in the name of Zacchaeus makes a really great example of that, and another Miriam, later on makes a great example of someone changing their ways. Um, you know, the wisdom is shown in the results that even the worst of society, by regards of the Pharisees, can turn and become part of the children of the kingdom um, by embracing, what Yeshua has done for them. So, wisdom is known by her children. Okay, justified by her children. In other words, hanging out with sinners is justified by the result of them being drawn to God. Okay, which, by the way, is contrast to the Pharisee point of view, which was that even most of Israel was not holy enough to be worth their attention and interaction or contact. So um, it was kind of an insult to the Pharisees when that was said. Okay, verse 26. But the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. Okay, but the above Jerusalem free is, which is mother of all of us. Okay, English one's Greek New Testament. Okay, the point being made is that fleshly actions to achieve God's design do not work. Thus, Pharisaism does not work. I'd also add modern Orthodox. Only the promise and now fulfillment of Bereshit, Genesis 12:3, that in Abraham's seed, that is Messiah, are the Gentiles brought near to God. Okay, so converting doesn't bring a Gentile near, but rather embracing the promise that because of Abraham's seed, Messiah, they are brought near and become part of the family. You see the difference. You see the explanation. You see the unnecessariness of making conversion to a man-made system. And that's what Galatians is all talking about. This is why I know it's a broken record, and I say it 100 times in each study, but this is what you need to be expert at for two reasons. One, to protect yourself from somebody pulling you in the wrong direction, and two, countering the bad education that goes on because people don't understand what Paul's writing about in Galatians. Okay, so back to again, which law? Not Torah, even though Sinai is the location of where Torah was given, but oral Torah, the traditions that are alleged to have also been given at Sinai, and clearly not so, but that's what's taught. Okay. More commentary. But the Yerushalayim above corresponds to Sarah, is free, and she is our mother. Okay, so contrasting the physical Jerusalem from the heavenly Jerusalem now in our text. The mother of all, who have the mother of all, who have the trusting faithfulness that Abraham and Yeshua had. Okay, whether Messianic Jews or Messianic Gentiles. Okay, yeah. Okay, my eyes are giving me trouble. Because Judaism associated the Messiah and the Spirit with the end times, Paul would naturally identify followers of the Messiah Jesus, with the future Jerusalem rather than the present one. Okay. And so, because we're looking forward to the return of Messiah to rule and reign, that makes sense for us. Okay. So what's going on in this world we know is flawed and partial. We know when Messiah comes, he will bring us to the fullness of what all we're supposed to be doing. Okay. Oops. What am I doing here? Hitting the wrong button. Okay, let me see. There we go. Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you, Barbara. Buffering stopped when I went into the teaching. God is good. Okay. Any questions, comments, rebukes on what we've covered? You're welcome to, if you have a question or something on something different, that's okay too. We're very flexible. If you come to our gatherings, our meetings, you'll notice that I'm perfectly happy to take all questions. We do go down rabbit holes, and I do my best to drag everybody kicking and screaming back to our topic, but hey, you know, um, that's my job and I love it. So, um, so anything else, if you want to add any questions, comments, or rebukes, put it in. Otherwise, I'm going to start wrapping up. And just to make sure that I don't leave part of this behind, I'll go silent for a couple of minutes after I'm done, and you're certainly welcome to go at that point. So, just a reminder, you're listening to Simchat Yeshua Messianic Fellowship. This is our weekly Wednesday, 6 o'clock California time study in Galatians. We will go to the next section of Galatians chapter 4 for next week's study. God willing, we'll all be here and everything will do well. And be sure to like, to subscribe, to ring the bell, to do all that stuff. So we can all do the YouTube thing. If you like what you've heard and you want to support the congregation or this channel, you can go to our website. There's a way to donate there. This is the only chance I get to mention that because on Sabbath I don't talk money. So this is my only place to where I can mention that. If you want to donate, there it is. And again, our website is simchatyeshua.org, and that's spelled SIMCHYESHUA, SIMCHATYESHUA, all one word. And also our Facebook page is also Simchat Yeshua. So give us a look-see, come hang out, say hello, leave a comment or something either on this channel, on this study, or on the Facebook page. Help yourself to what's on the website, and that's going to about do it. Okay, so I'm going to close up now. Give me about I'll take about 2 minutes before I actually close down. So just make sure that the buffer clears and you hear the last of what I'm talking about before I cut everything off. So God bless you guys. Have a good week. Have a good Sabbath. We just finished off our High Holy Days with Simchat Torah. Gotta love that holiday. One of my very favorite days. So, anyways, so we're rejoicing in the Torah and rejoicing in God's commandments. So God bless you guys. Have a good week, and we'll see you Shabbat if you can make it, and we'll see you here next Wednesday if you can make it, and we'll see you then. Okay, shalom, y'all.